I'm started. Good morning, good morning, good morning, beautiful people. How are you today? I am getting us over on Facebook Live so we can live stream it. Thanks so much for all the love yesterday. I was on my Instagram and Facebook and I saw a lot of the posts that you guys were doing, that you got some value from yesterday, and you're really looking forward to being here today, as am I. Really excited about what we're covering today. Jade, you're making me hungry. I see you over there cooking. My stomach's already growling looking at you. So how are you guys doing today? And if you weren't here yesterday, and this is your first day here because we had some Zoom issues, I'd love for you to just throw in the chat for me where you're actually from. Where are you calling in from? If you didn't have an opportunity to tell me that yesterday, go ahead and share that with me today. I want to see where people in here are actually coming from. We had people from South Carolina, North Carolina. We had them from Florida. We had them from Miami. We had them California, Virginia, Sacramento, Atlanta, of course, Bergen County for sure. Round Top, Texas. Don't know where Round Top is. I actually used to live in Pflugerville, which was near Round Rock. I don't know if that's anywhere in that particular area. Rockland County, Maryland. Yes, sir. Mr. Michael, how you doing today? It was good to see you yesterday. What's up, Eric? Thank you guys so much for being here. We're getting everything loaded up and just giving people an opportunity to actually chime in. As I said yesterday, I want you to take something away from today, and I want you guys to do what we all should be doing, which is documenting versus creating. So you're going to see me a couple times during the presentation, grabbing my cell phone, taking a few screenshots. If there's anything I say or anything that's really, impactful for you and you want to share that, I'd love for you to just take a screen grab and tag me. As you can see right here on the screen, you can tag me directly on Instagram at David Radney Push, and I'd love for you guys to do that. So I got New Jersey, I got Central New Jersey. As you guys are, what's up, Eric? As you guys are coming in, if you didn't tell me where you were from yesterday, I'd love for you to just throw in the chat where you're actually calling in from. And we're going to go ahead and get started because I want to be respectful of your time. I also have an inner circle mastermind group called Thrive for people who've gone through my training program, where we continue to level up and there's accountability. I have that meeting starting promptly at 12:30. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I wrap you guys up probably no later than 12:25. So there's a smooth transition. So we'll be here 60 to 90 minutes, but my goal is to have everything wrapped up by 12:25 today. Okay, so I see Passaic County. I did a lot of work in Ringwood and West Milford, so I know Passaic County. Minnesota, okay, all right. I like to see that. So I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. As you guys know, those of you who know me, I don't believe in waiting for everyone to show up. I believe in getting started because, in real estate, it's about your word and what you tell people. You tell them you're gonna be at an appointment at 11 o'clock, you better be there. Your word is your bond, and this is how people get to know you. So before we get started, again, I want you to do a capture and share. If you're not following me already on TikTok, here's my handle for TikTok is DRadney, and then my handle for Instagram is David Radney Push. If you guys aren't currently following me there, I would love to follow. Definitely will follow you back as long as you have a picture and a profile so I know who you are. I'll definitely follow you back. And if you guys don't have a profile and picture, make sure you're setting that up in your social media so your clients know how to get a hold of you and contact you. So please follow me. And like I said before, I definitely will follow you guys back. Just a quick recap for those of you who weren't able to be here yesterday, or if you were here and you just needed a reminder of what we talked about. We talked about building respect over rapport. We talked about you're more valuable now if you're the local economist of choice. And we talked about the fact that a motivated seller will always list, which is why it's so important that we do the pre-qualification and we understand what their motivation is so that we can take the listing. We also talked about the triangle. Where are you focused at right now? Are you focused on self? Are you kind of starting off where there's a lot of fear and your clients feel really concerned with you? Or have you mastered this process where you're coming from contribution and being viewed as an authority and your clients recognize that and want to work with you? It's okay, no matter where you are on this triangle, it's okay because every day you should be working to improve yourself and getting 1% better every day. And we're going to be discussing things today and tomorrow that can help you level up and move up on this triangle. And then lastly, we talked about where are you focusing your time right now? Is it in areas that are maybe high conversion, low leverage, or areas that are in high leverage, low conversion, like social media, door knocking, and working your database, where you really should be going after your fastest source of business opportunity, people who actually have their hands raised and are actually saying that they want to work with you. So I want you guys to understand this. You're just one presentation away from the breakthrough that you want. You know, I didn't have 5 or 4 or 3 different presentations. I really had one presentation that I fine-tuned to the point where it guaranteed that I would generate the type of income that I needed to generate as a real estate agent and provide for my family. So that's what we're going to talk about today, putting that together. But we're going to talk about the challenges you face. We're going to talk about the opportunities that are out there for you, the 6 conversion mistakes that I see real estate agents make every single day in their business, and then what I call the 5X close system. That's what we're going to talk about today. So first of all, the top 4 challenges. Number 1, being viewed as a local expert. How do you do that so that your clients view you as the go-to person? You are the local expert. Second one is, will you be able to connect with your clients? Can you connect with them? And we talked about that yesterday when it comes to not focusing on building rapport and following the Ford method, but actually focusing on connecting with them and understanding what's important to them and what their motivation is. The third thing we're going to talk about is, why should they choose me? That's the challenge. Why should they choose you? Why should they hire you? And lastly, will I be able to convert that call to a listing opportunity? Will I be able to convert that listing appointment to an actual listing contract being signed? Those are the 4 challenges that I see agents, facing every single day. Now, here's the opportunity. This is the opportunity today. When the seller feels connected to you, they'll work with you. Sellers list with agents that actually show value. And the thing that I need you to really understand, and I talked about this morning on one of my lives on Instagram, commission is only an issue in the absence of value. And so it's really important that you understand how to demonstrate your value. And you have to understand that your value has to be shown several steps throughout the process of converting that seller. And then lastly, sellers will tell you how to close them if you listen. If you listen. And with that being said, I have to share something with you guys really quickly. Let me see if I can get some participation here. I can't see everybody's face, but the people I can see. Can you hold these 2 fingers up right here? I want you to hold these fingers up. I want to show you a hack that I learned, because we do more talking than we do listening. And I think you guys would understand the person who is controlling that conversation is the person who's not talking the most, but the person who's listening the most. And I noticed that I had this challenge where I would hear a seller talking and I knew what I wanted to say. And sometimes I would interrupt them sharing really good information with me because I had something that I wanted to say. And I got my point across, but what I failed to understand, and what you may fail to understand, is that when you interrupt them and you're doing too much talking, you're not giving them the opportunity to share what's important to them and how you can actually close them. So here's a hack I learned. And for those of you who know me, you've seen me do this, and now you'll understand why I actually do it. I have a hard time shutting up when I need to be quiet. So I've learned to put my thumb right here under my chin, and I'll take this other finger right over my top lip, and I will hold my mouth shut. Like I literally have to keep it shut. And I know that sounds crazy. However, there are times when I want to jump in there. And this is a constant reminder. Shut up, David. Just listen. Shut up. Don't talk right now. Be quiet. And you'll notice me on my calls. If you follow me, when people are talking, sometimes I'll go, and I'll just sit there like that. We need to get to a point where we remember our job is to listen. And if we're asking the right questions, which means we're following a script, we have a dialogue that we're going through, the sellers will give us all the information we want. The thing that keeps us from getting that information is we jump in and we interrupt. and then they kind of forget what they were talking about, and we never get that information that could have helped us. So if you just learn this simple gesture, this is worth the price of admission too, just this right here. I promise you, it will help you convert more. All right, so let me share my screen again. Give me 1 second. All right. Hold on 1 second here, guys. Matt, can you give me a thumbs up on if my screen was shared on your end, because I'm having an issue where I don't see it on my side. Or did you see it?
It came up briefly and then
it went off. Okay, guys, give me 1 second here. So as I'm getting the screen up, what I do want to say really quickly, in regards to what we're talking about with listening to people, you have to understand when it comes to converting, people want to know that they're being heard. It's so important that they know we're listening and we're taking the time to understand what they're talking about. That connection piece is huge. And I just want you guys to get to a point where you understand that your job is to ask the questions and let them lead you. They're going to tell you what you need to know in order to convert them. You just, again, have to be present for the conversation. You have to be willing to listen and hear them out, but they'll tell you everything that you need to know to actually convert them. All right, so I'm going to reshare my screen here. I don't know, guys. I'm going to say this right now, and you'll hear me say this a lot. I love technology, but I don't love it today. It is not working for me today. So I'm just gonna freestyle this until I get it figured out on my end. For some reason, I am having a tech issue over here where my technology does not want to work for me. So if you guys can just bear with me as I figure this out, and we'll get to it. Give me 1 second here. And you wouldn't believe, just so I can tell you this, and you guys who know me, I've been on this computer for about 20 minutes before you guys even got here, practicing and making sure I had everything set up. I had everything running like it's supposed to be running. I tested it with my admin, made sure they could see everything they needed to see. You guys get on here, I hit the button, and guess what? Doesn't work. But that's the whole thing. We got to learn how to adapt. And that's one thing I've learned about being listing focused and talking to people. There are going to be times when you're presenting and somebody throws something your way and they completely interrupt what you were going to say. They throw in a pattern interrupt and you kind of lose your place and don't know where to go. We got to learn how to be fluid. We got to learn how to adapt. And that's what I'm doing right now as I figure out this technology. So I hope that you guys can appreciate that. And we'll go ahead and get it back started again. All right, here we go. I think it's working now. Somebody can just unmute and tell me, yes, you see the screen. I think I got the technology working now. Can I get a yes on that?
Yes, it's working now.
All right, perfect. Thank you, guys. And I apologize about that. Hopefully that does not happen again, and I'll stop unsharing my screen so that doesn't happen. So what I really want to talk to you guys about today is the 6 conversion mistakes that agents make and how you can make sure that you're not making those mistakes when you're in front of a seller. So when it comes to that, what's the hardest part for you when it comes to converting appointments to listings? When you guys think about the phone calls that you're making, when you're talking to sellers on the phone and you're actually attempting to work with them and book an appointment, what's the hardest part when it comes to converting appointments to listings to you? I want you to go ahead and put that in the chat and tell me what that is. I'm waiting. What's the hardest part? Converting appointments to listings. Well, getting an appointment, I get that. That can be really tough if you're not even getting the opportunity. But if you are getting the opportunity and you're trying to convert that appointment to a listing, what's the hardest thing? Closing. Okay, so this is a common thing we always hear, like overcoming objections, closing, getting the signature at the appointment. That's a big one. Who said that? John, I got to tell you the biggest thing about that, and I appreciate you saying that and putting that in the chat. I'll share this later on in the presentation, but here's a rule of thumb that you guys need to understand. If you don't get it signed at the listing appointment, your chance of getting it signed goes down 50%. I don't know if you're aware of that, but it goes down 50%. And so that's why we're going to discuss something today. And I definitely want you guys taking notes when we do, but it's the 5X close we need to close. We need to be prepared to close at the very least up to 5 times. And I don't want to get into that too much here. We'll cover that later on, but you need to know how to close multiple times before you get up and leave that house, because once you do, your chances of getting it signed go down 50%. Asking for the signature. Okay, who put that in? Jacob. Yeah. Listen, I will tell you this too, Jacob, when it comes to asking for the signature, it may seem silly, but that's something that we need to be role playing. That should be part of our role play where we say, okay, we're in agreement on price. We're in agreement on commission. Now, all I need you to do is sign the contract, and you're handing them a pen. A lot of people don't do it. And if they do it, it's not with confidence. It's more like, are you willing to sign the contract? It's almost like they're asking a question versus being the authority. Remember, as agents, we want to show up and be the authority. So when we get to the point where we're done and we're ready to get the paperwork signed, we have to say with authority, and now all you need to do is simply sign the contract. Here's a pen, and give them the pen and let them sign the contract so you can be on your way to your next appointment and getting your next listing. Asking for the listing, getting my fair share, 6%. Okay, I hear that. Getting past the objections, especially the for sale by owners, which can be tough. And yet I will tell you, I built my business on for sale by owners. National Association of Realtors will tell you, and I know from my personal experience, 90% of them, and it's probably a little higher now, end up listing with an agent. And I don't know if you guys really hear me on that, 90%. So if you looked at Zillow for the area you work in, and you identified 10 for sale by owner properties, the statistics show 9 of them are going to list with an agent. They could and would list with you. Number 1, you aren't calling. Number 2, you aren't doing the follow-up. Number 3, you aren't showing your value. That's what we need to learn how to do if we want to start converting those type of opportunities at a higher level. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's move on. Thank you so much for putting that in the chat. I appreciate that, guys. So here are the 6 conversion mistakes that agents make. Are you guys ready for this? And I want to know, like, as I say them, if you feel like that's you, when I say these 6 conversion mistakes, just throw me in the chat so I actually know that this is something that you're actually dealing with and struggling with. All right, so let's go to the first one. Convincing versus connecting. So most agents end up spending their time working to convince a seller to list with them versus connecting with the seller. I still remember this listing opportunity. I connected with the for sale by owner, and they were dead set against working with agents. And I saw this as a challenge. When someone tells me no, you know, I always wore the New York Yankees hat when I prospected, because I always took a no as meaning not yet. So I would let that NY remind me, they're not telling me no, they're telling me not yet. So when someone was refusing to work with agents, that became a challenge for me. And so I just put together this aggressive marketing plan. I consistently followed up with them. And after weeks and weeks and months of follow-up, they decided to meet with me. They had a big hang up around price and commission, as most for sale by owners do. There's no surprise there, right? However, they eventually agreed to meet with me. And I show up, and I remember I walked up to their front door and I knocked on the door, and the seller answered. And immediately he saw that I had my for sale sign in my hand. And he was like, hey, we haven't decided to list with you. And I'm like, I know, no problem. However, if you decide to, I want to make sure I'm prepared and I have my sign here. And I just have to tell you guys a little something about me and why I do things that way. I grew up in a house. My mom was extremely religious. We went to church 3 times a week and sometimes twice on Sundays. And she would always say something like, if you want something in life, you have to claim it. I don't know if you guys have heard someone say that before. Maybe this will resonate with you more. And maybe I'm dating myself when I tell you this. I used to, we used to drive around in cars, and my brother and I would play this game. You guys play that? That's my car. That's my car. Like you're claiming that's the car that you want. I took that same attitude when I was younger, and I translated that into real estate, and I started claiming listings. You know, if I'm making the calls and doing the follow-up and you invite me out, I want to show up and show you like, hey, I'm ready to go. I got my sign here. I'm claiming this listing. And maybe you don't want to walk up and carry a full for sale sign. Maybe you show up and you claim it by having the Supra lockbox in your hand, right? Prepared to take the listing. Because if you follow the pre-sale approach that I cover in my training, part of that is telling the seller to have 2 keys ready for your listing appointment. So if they are coachable and they're motivated and they actually have those keys ready, number one, you should feel good about yourself because they're showing you they're coachable and they're ready to list. And number two, you're showing them you're there to take the listing. You show up with your Supra lockbox or your sign. So I know I went down a rabbit hole there, but I just wanted to share that with you because I think it's so important to come in knowing with confidence that this is your listing. And you really are going to decide whether or not you want to take that listing or not. And the way you do that is by claiming the listing. So if you aren't doing something like that in your business, maybe think about taking a Supra lockbox with you and showing up and letting them know that you're about business. All right, so I'm gonna get back to my story. So I met with this for sale by owner. Like I told you before, they were really tough on pricing and they didn't want to work with agents. However, just from being so consistent with my follow-up, they booked an appointment with me. So I sit down with them and I talk with them. And if I'm being transparent here, I will just tell you this. I was sick and tired of seeing everybody else in my office putting listings up on the board. I was tired of seeing everybody else in my office on Facebook saying, hey, I got a new listing. I'm having an open house this Sunday. Hey, come by my broker open. I wanted to win. And I was doing so much follow-up with this seller. I wanted to walk away with that listing. That was my goal, was to get the listing. I took it, and I shouldn't have taken it because the seller was very adamant about wanting his price. The seller was very adamant about paying a certain commission. And I took all of the standards that I knew I should be following, and I threw it out the window because I wanted to win. I made it about me. And I took that listing. Now, I was happy. I went home, Michelle and I popped a bottle of Prosecco and we celebrated. And the following day, I had my photographers out there, I had my stagers out there. I did all the things that we do when you get a new listing. You know, you send out your postcard, you do your broker opens, you do your open houses. You know, 2 weeks in, we weren't getting any offers, you know, and we barely had any showings. And of course, I knew why. We were overpriced. So I did another open house the following Sunday, and eventually we got an offer, but it came in lower than the list price. But what was interesting is it came in right around the range that I recommended to them. I just allowed them to outscript me, and I ended up listing the property for more money. So over time, I was able to talk with them, and over time, I was able to convince them to reposition the price of that property. But we're talking months later. And by that time, once we had gotten the price down where it should have been, yes, we got it sold, but it actually ended up selling for less than it could have because we came out the gate at the wrong number. So here's a positive. Listen, when you know the motivation, and this is what I didn't know about the seller. I was so happy just to get the listing. I pushed past all that. I didn't pre-qualify it. I didn't really understand the motivation. But when you know the motivation, you can push the buttons. People are either running towards pleasure or running away from pain. And you can push those buttons to convince them to price the property correctly. But when you are so busy convincing them to list with you, you don't really focus on that stuff because you're more worried about you getting the listing. You're not making it about the seller. You're making it about you. I was making it about me. And so I got the listing, but it was a disservice to me, and it was actually a disservice to the seller as well. So I learned, and this is something that I want you guys to write this down. Sometimes you have to go slow in order to go fast. And what I mean by that is that I should have slowed down that whole listing process. And instead of just being so excited to get out there and take the listing, I should have slowed down and really made sure I understood everything that was important to that seller, fully understand the motivation, because if I had, more than likely, I would have gotten them to list at a price that made sense. But because I didn't understand their motivation and I was rushing to take the listing and making it more about myself, we ended up taking it overpriced. It did eventually end up selling, but they didn't get the money that they wanted. And I didn't get the commission that I was worth because I ended up lowering my commission to get the listing. I hope you guys hear me on that. So when you are convincing, you're making the meeting about you, and people don't really care about you until they know you care about them. We've said that plenty of times. I hope you guys know that to be true. So here's the thing that I want to talk to you about, the 5-question formula. This is how you dig into motivation, by having a formula, a dialogue of questions to actually dig deep into motivation. And I just want to briefly cover these with you really quickly. We talk to sellers all the time. Why are you moving? When do you have to be there? And typically that's all we do when we're attempting to find out more about the seller's motivation. We think if we know they're moving to Ohio and they have to be there by September, we know enough and we have a hot listing. I have to tell you, that's not enough information. And so the 5-question formula is set up as a way to help you dig deeper and really have a better understanding. So let's just go through these really quickly. The question number 1 would be, why are you selling the home? Number 2 is, what's important to you about selling the home? Then, what will selling do for you? Now listen, I'm asking, what will it do for you? And then I'm following it up with saying, once you're there, like we're painting a picture, we got to get people to imagine this stuff with us. Once you've sold the house and you're in this new location, you're living the life that you want to live, how does that make you feel? And then lastly, what's your time frame? So what I want you to understand about this 5-question formula is that you're kind of peeling back the onion. You're getting them to not just tell you the surface, Ohio by September, but why and what that's going to do for them. So you understand the motivation, and then you're asking, how is that going to make them feel? Remember what we talked about yesterday? If I can just rewind you for a second, logic makes people think, emotion makes people act. So we have to get to a point where we are connecting with them on an emotional level. We understand that emotional reason for the move. And for some of you, this may feel a little uncomfortable to kind of dig like this. I will tell you, it's the difference between you getting the appointment. It's the difference between you getting the listing. You have to be able to dig. And these are just 5 of the questions. What I will tell you is, as you're asking these questions and people are sharing with you, again, be quiet. Let them answer you completely. Don't interrupt, don't interject, just listen. And then what I want you to learn how to do, and this is just a little bonus that I want you to write down, I want you to say things like, tell me more about that. When you say that, they're going to give you even more information. You need this information to get them to make a buying decision. So slow down so that you can go fast later on. Slow down to make sure that you're actually getting this information. So like I mentioned before, on the screen, you see people are either running from pain or they're running towards pleasure. It's up to you to figure out what that is through having a 5-question formula, by digging deep, by listening and not talking so much. And I want you guys to type yes in the chat if you can see how knowing the emotional reason for the move will get you more signed contracts with motivated sellers who are coachable. If you can see how that would be a reality by taking the time to dig deep, I want you in the chat to just type yes, so I know you get what I'm saying here. All right, I appreciate that, love it. Okay, Liz with the multiple S's, I got you, I see you. All right, so if you helped your clients make a decision naturally, like you weren't convincing them, you're helping them make a decision because you're pushing them towards what's important to them, what could that do for you? What could that do for them? That's what you need to think about. You're helping them make a natural decision. You're not convincing them. You're connecting with them. You're understanding the problem and you're helping them solve the problem. That is our job. That's what we should be doing. So here's the second thing that I noticed that agents do. Guilty of this myself in the past. I was very guilty of it. They wing it, right? Most agents show up to a listing appointment without being prepared and wing it. And in this market, competition is so high. We show up and we want people to pay us professional fees. We want to get our 6%. We want to get paid what we're worth. And yet we show up and we give an amateur performance because we're not highly scripted. You may land the listing sometimes just because you showed up at the right time. However, if you want a business that's predictable and consistent, you have to be following a canned listing presentation. You can't wing it anymore. And I will tell you, when I first started, I dug myself into a hole, and we're talking many, many, many years back. But not being prepared brought up a lot of doubt for my clients, and it kept me from having the ability to actually close. I remember calling an expired listing, and the minute I arrived, the seller wanted to show me who was in charge. Instead of letting me walk around the property, they wanted to give me the full tour. And I could do a tour in 5 minutes. It took 30 minutes for them to walk me around and show the property. And then we sat down to discuss price, and they really threw me for a loop, right? I shared the comps, and the seller knew more about the house than I did. They asked me some really pointed questions about the comps that I was bringing up. And because I wasn't really prepared and I just kind of threw everything together, it really caused them to have some concern. And they started questioning me, and questions like this started popping up. Well, how long have you been an agent? Have you sold any homes in my neighborhood? And how many homes have you sold? Not your company, how many homes have you sold? And see, that's the difference between being prepared and winging it. When you're prepared, I've had agents that were brand new, go through my training program, went out and took a listing. And at the closing, they told the seller, "Thank you so much for giving me my first opportunity selling a house." And the seller was like, "What do you mean this is your first house you sold?" And they're like, "I'm brand new." And the seller never knew it because they followed a systematic approach and they followed a canned listing presentation. You give the seller a reason to interview more people and to question you when you show up and you just attempt to wing it, because you don't have the information you need. You don't have the talking points you need. You're not equipped to handle the comps. You're not equipped to ask the detailed questions, to dig really deep and to overcome the objections that are being thrown out to you. So you actually make them say, we'll be in touch. And what they end up doing is they end up calling another agent who is prepared. They take the listing and you never hear from that seller again. So I have to say this, we have to make a commitment in our business to no longer wing it. We have to put in the practice. It taught me a very valuable lesson that being highly scripted is important, and that being a local economist and knowing my numbers was extremely important. So what I want to talk to you now about is the importance of having a canned listing presentation. Imagine if you had one that had structure to it. There was an intro, there was a section where you really went over high-level conversations on pricing, and you knew how to close. You went over the close and could actually get the paperwork signed when you were there. On a scale of 0 to 10, how important do you guys feel it is to have a structured process, a structured listing plan of action when you go out and meet with the seller? How important is that to you guys on a scale of 0 to 10? I mean, and if it's anything lower than a 10, I'm kind of looking at you sideways, right? This question is set up to get 10s. Like, it's that important. The question is, do you have it? And if you don't, are you ready to create one so that you can go out and get your unfair share? That's where I want you to be thinking right now. I need you to be thinking about, okay, I see it's important. Now I need the resources so I can put that together and go out there and take listings and get my 6% and get the properties priced right, because I'm meeting with coachable and motivated sellers. Now, if your seller felt fully connected with you through the entire presentation, how would that feel? I want you to think about that. You're sitting down belly to belly with the seller, and you're able to connect with them. You're able to answer their questions. You're able to lead them into making a decision where they're pricing this property to hit the goal they want, to solve the problem they have, to get to where they're trying to go. and they feel connected and they trust you and they view you as an authority, how great would that feel? I want you to think about the first word that comes up when I say that. What's the word that comes up when you think about having that type of connection with your seller? And I want you to throw that in the chat. And I know that I have you guys throwing a lot in the chat, but I want to make sure that you're plugged in and you're paying attention, because I know how this goes. We get on these calls and we start checking emails and we're on social media. We're not engaged in the conversation. You're going to get out of this class what you put into it. And I want to make sure that you're plugged in and listening to the information. Okay, so you feel confident. I love that, Brooke. Okay, motivated, feel like a boss. Okay, RJ, triumphant, confident, satisfying, amazing. Like, that's absolutely right. You feel really confident, like, I'm connecting. This is actually my listing to lose. Like, if do I want the listing versus them choosing you? Do you actually want it? It's a great feeling to have. All right, can you guys commit to that? Can you commit to mastering that process? Can you commit to that for your business and for your life? Make it about the seller, not you. Keep that in mind. Every time you make a call, it's about them, not you. Every time you go on an appointment, it's about them, not you. All right, here's the next one. You cannot defend the comps. This is another issue that I see all the time. Most agents don't spend time becoming the local economist of choice. We talked about that yesterday. They don't know the market. If you don't have the confidence in your pricing, you can easily be convinced by the seller to overprice the property, right? I remember like it was yesterday. Picture this with me. All right, I'm on this listing appointment and I'm sitting across the table from the seller. And I just went over all the comps and talked about where it should be priced. I wasn't an authority on running comps. I was okay on the scale of 0 to 10. Maybe I was a 2 or a 3. So I kind of knew how to navigate the conversation. I didn't have ultra confidence in my ability to go over the comps and discuss pricing. And here's what she said to me when I gave her the number. She said, but I just put in the new septic. I spent $30,000 and I want to recoup that money. And she was selling me hard on this. She was like, I need that 30K back. And so I didn't really know how to respond to that because I didn't have the proper training on handling objections like that. And if I'm being honest, like low key, it kind of made sense to me. I'm like, she spent 30 grand on the septic. If I spent 30 grand, I'd want to recoup that too. So I got out scripted. Here's what I need you to understand. You guys are here learning different scripts. That's what I do. I train agents on scripting and what to say and how to say it. But these sellers, they're learning scripts too. They're talking to agents, they're getting phone calls. And so you're learning a script, they're learning a script. And sometimes you can get out scripted by the seller. I got out scripted. I bought into her narrative that because of this new septic, her house was worth 30K more. So I listed it. Anybody want to guess what happened when I listed it 30 grand overpriced? Oh, go ahead and put it in the chat. What happened with that listing when I listed it 30K above where it should have been? Did I sell it? It sat. Christine, you're right. It sat. It sat there. And so what we ended up doing, of course, over time, we got it priced correctly and we were able to get it sold. That should have never happened. So here's a positive. Knowing the comps and how to defend them allow you to advocate for the seller's motivation. We end up taking overpriced listings that expire if we don't know how to actually have that conversation and how to ask powerful questions, which is what I want to get into next. So what I will tell you with this particular seller who outscripted me, what I know now that I didn't know then when she's saying, David, I want to sell my house for 30K over list price. What I should have said was, okay, Sally, specifically, why do you think your house is worth more than $30,000 more than the competition? Specifically, tell me. And of course, she's going to come back and say, well, I just put in a new septic. Well, if you don't know how to handle that, you're going to fall into the same trap I fell into, and you may end up taking that listing over price. However, shouldn't we be saying, Sally, that really just means you brought up your home up to selling standards. All homes need a septic, right? I didn't know how to say that. I didn't know how to push back. So what we need to learn how to do is ask powerful questions that can get the seller to understand, okay, I hear you on that. All my neighbors that are selling, they all have a working septic. If I want to sell my home, people expect to buy a house that has a working septic, so I have to price it in line with the competition. I can't get more for making my house selling standard. Does that make sense? But that's asking powerful questions. And sometimes it may seem a little aggressive to look your seller in the eye and say, specifically, tell me why. However, that's our job. Asking powerful questions will get them to where we want them to go. If we tell them, hey, if you overprice it, you're not going to sell it, that's our opinion. But when we talk to them and they can come to that realization and they start understanding that, yes, they're just making it basic like all the other homes that are selling, then it's fact because they came to that conclusion. We get the sellers to come to the conclusion by asking questions. And that's something that needs to be practiced. We have to practice asking those difficult conversations and having those difficult questions. Now, one thing I will say about taking an overpriced listing, to me, there's a bit of a caveat there. The only time I would do it is if the seller was one of the sellers where they're like, hey, I want to test the market a little bit. I want to see if I can actually get my number. And let me just tell you a story about that. My wife and I were selling our house about 4.5 years ago in Bergen County. And I, as an agent, I hired another agent. I hired Sergio, who's in the Wyckoff office, to come sell my home. And we interviewed 2 or 3 agents just to kind of go through the process. And the agents came in, Sergio said, we can get 850. The other person was saying roughly around 850. And my wife was like, well, what do you want to do? Where do you want to price it? And I said, well, I actually ran the numbers. I'd love to get 850, but I think 850 is too high. I think the number is 800. Let's list it at 800 so we can quickly sell it, because we were building a house. We needed to get to our next property. And so my wife was like, I want to start at 850, right? And I'm looking at her and I'm like, you do know I do this shit for a living. Like, I know what I'm talking about. It needs to be at 800. But even spouses of realtors sometimes want to test the market. Like, they just want to believe that they can get that 850, right? So we agreed to do it at 850. And here's what I'll tell you. Here's the caveat. If you take an overpriced listing and you take it for a short period of time and the seller signs a price reduction form up front and they commit to lowering the price in 2 weeks or 3 weeks if they can't get their number, that's the only reason I would take an overpriced listing. And what did our property sell for? It sold for $799, just like I knew it would. But again, sometimes people really push. They really want the opportunity to see if they can get more money. So they're not going to always be in agreement to price it where you want to price it. And so you have to understand that. And I'm not saying anytime you should always run away from an overpriced listing. I'm saying if they're willing to sign the paperwork with you, where they lower it if it does not sell in a short period of time. And the rule of thumb, the National Association of Realtors tells us that if a property doesn't sell in usually 14 days or less, if we don't have any offers or activity, that's the market telling us that that property is overpriced. And so that's what I would tell my clients, and they would agree to that. Let's give it 14 days. If we don't get what we're looking for, then we'll be open to actually reducing the price, and then you can run with it and list it at the price that you're recommending. I will tell you guys, do not take a listing if they're not willing to be coachable. If they're not listening to you and they're not willing to price it in that range, then make sure that you don't take it. Does that make sense? Christine, I see you laughing at me. Listen, that was a real story when I tell you that my wife was so adamant about getting this number, and I felt her on that, but I was pushing back. But happy life, happy wife. I'm married 22 years. I had to give it to her. I had to give her an opportunity to see if we can get that number, but it didn't happen like I knew it wouldn't happen. All right, I'm going to reshare my screen. All right, here we go. So how would you feel if you had control of the conversation around pricing a home? If you go in and you have the authority, you know the comps, you understand how to defend the comps, you understand how to price property, and more importantly, you really understand the motivation of the seller. So when they're pushing back on you about wanting more, you actually knew that you could stand your ground and get them to price the property correctly. How would that feel? That's got to be a great feeling, right? Remember, your income is in direct proportion with your ability to have difficult conversations and to ask powerful questions. So this is something you have to lean into. You have to practice this, having direct conversations, asking difficult conversations. That's what your income is tied to. So can you guys commit to mastering and practicing the art of asking powerful questions and having powerful conversations with your sellers? Is that something that you can commit to? And you know, if you can, you know what I'm going to ask you to do, right? I'm going to ask you to put yes in the chat, right? I appreciate that. And here's the thing that I really want to point out. I have 80 something people here. I want to hear if you're committed to it. I want to see 80 something yeses in this chat. I'm not talking to me. I already know this stuff. I want to make sure that you're committed to it. All right. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. All right. So here's the thing, not fighting for their motivation. Every seller presentation should be about the seller's motivation. And there are several times during the listing that these major decisions have to be made. You know, you have to make decisions around pricing, if they're going to list with you, accepting offers, negotiating repairs, etc. There are going to be several times when you're head to head with the seller. And if you understand the motivation, you know what buttons to push that will cause them to price it correctly, that will get them to list with you, that will get them to accept the offer. You know you can push those buttons once you understand the motivation. And that's why it's so important that we spend time digging deep and uncovering that motivation. So many times getting the seller to make a decision requires you to have those difficult conversations. You can't make it about you, closing another deal or getting another paycheck. So what do you make this about? You make the conversation about them. You make it about their motivation. And I remember being at a listing appointment and the couple got into a pretty heated conversation about price, to the point where I was kind of thinking, should I just go? Should I get up and walk away? And then I remember what was so important to them. And I said this because I listened, because I took notes, I really understood their motivation. I said, can I be direct with you? And I've never had someone say, no, you can't be direct. So I always ask for permission. Can I be direct with you? And once I got their permission, I said, the price that you guys want isn't going to get you to California in time to start your new job in May. And if we price it that high in May, you may still be in New Jersey. So that's where it comes into asking powerful questions. My next question was, what will it mean for your family if this house is still on the market in May? What is that going to mean? I know your job is starting. If the home doesn't sell and you're still here, what's that mean for your family? And that's all I had to say. The seller was super motivated because he understood and the wife understood, if they didn't sell the house, the husband had to go to California to start this new job and leave the family in New Jersey. And the wife would have had to manage the sale of the home, manage her 2 young sons, manage her job. And she didn't want to do that. She wanted to make sure that when they moved, it was a collective move. Everyone got out to California at one time. So guess what? Once we had that conversation and we talked about what they really wanted and the fact that they wanted to move out there together, and there was pain with her being left behind, they were willing to come to terms and price it at a price that would cause the home to sell, so that May the entire family could actually be out in California. That's the importance of understanding motivation. That's the importance of listening and taking really good notes, because I didn't have to say a whole lot. I just had to throw that question out there. What's that mean to your family if the home doesn't sell and May comes around and you guys are still here? So here's a negative. You get nervous, you get flustered a lot of times at appointments when the focus is on you. The positive is you remove that pressure when you make the presentation about connecting with the seller and making it about the seller's motivation. And you have to practice these conversations. It doesn't come easy. You have to practice this and being in conversations with people. So when that situation arises, you know how to handle that situation. I show a video in my training program of Michael Jordan, and he's being interviewed. And the person interviewing says, tell me about game 6. And Michael Jordan was like, oh, that shot. And the guy was like, yes, like you had 13 seconds on the clock. You got the ball, you made the shot, you won the whole playoffs for your team. Tell me about that shot. And here's what Michael Jordan said that really stuck with me. He was like, man, that shot was nothing. You should have saw us at practice the night before. Like, that's how we practice. We're practicing like we're playing the real game. So during the real game, when I get the ball and I have those few seconds left, I've practiced this move. This is nothing. I can get that shot all day. That's how you need to be. That's how we need to be as real estate professionals. It's not practicing until we get it right. It's practicing until we can't get it wrong. So that when we're in situations with sellers and something comes up, you're like, oh, I handle that in my role play. I know how to handle that. I know what to say. I know what questions to ask. I know how to overcome that objection. We have to practice until we can't get it wrong. I hope that makes sense to you guys. So I want to introduce you to someone here. Susan, it's one of my students who went through my training program in Miami. And here's what I'll tell you. One thing that she shared with me, and I like to ask during the exit interviews, like, what was the major impact that going through my program had on you? And she said, learning how to be prepared and learning how to take control of the listing presentation. And she said the biggest thing for her, and this is kind of what I just shared with you guys right now, was getting the seller's permission to be direct with them and then taking the time to slow down and ask a lot of questions. That was the biggest thing. So think about that. How would your presentations change if you took control of the listing presentation? You're taking control, not the seller. You're taking the opportunity to be direct with them and ask permission to be direct. But more importantly, you're the authority because you're asking the questions, and the person asking the questions controls the conversations. I hope you understand that. That leads me to, how do you get better at that? How do you get better at that? Well, it's role play. It's practicing what you need to say every single day. And I don't really even like to call it role play. I like to call it real play, because your real play should be as if you're talking to a seller. It's not that you're talking to another agent that you know. Your mind needs to be, I'm the agent, this is a seller. And when you show up that way, you're not saying things like, let me start over, I made a mistake. No, you're learning how to just continue to push through, even if you make a mistake, because the seller doesn't know your script. So you just need to learn how to keep going. And that's the beauty of doing what we call real play. Now, the hardest part is finding people who are willing to role play with you. I think that's probably one of the hardest things as an agent. It was for me to find people who were willing to role play and people who were willing to be consistent. And so I just wanted to tell you 3 things that you want to focus on here. You want to focus on people who are actually actively calling and prospecting and calling for sell-by owners and expireds. You want people who are actually playing the game, because they're going to be able to make those calls more realistic. They're making those calls every day, and they're going to be able to give you more value. And what you should be doing is making calls and taking notes. When you get an objection, you should write that down. When the question comes up that you can't handle, you should write that down. And the following day, when you have your real play with your partner, you should be posing those objections and those questions to your partner to see how well they do at overcoming the objections, how well they do at answering the questions. And then whatever they say, you should be writing that down in your notes, and you should be coming up with a scripting binder on how to handle those different questions and how to handle those different objections. So you want someone who's actively calling. The other thing you want is someone who's experienced, but more importantly, someone who's committed. I will tell you that I played this 3 strikes and you're out. If you don't show up, if you show up and you're sitting there and you want to talk more about life and what's going on with you, if you're not prepared to actually play, you don't have your scripts together, they're not with you, and you're not committed to the process, for me, it's 3 strikes and you're out. I don't have time to waste on someone who's not going to take this serious. In my mind, I'd be better off being my own role play partner and doing the script myself than being with someone who's not going to take this serious. This is how we make our money. We don't want to practice on our paychecks. We want the opportunity to actually practice with people who are serious and out there actively calling every day. So when you think about finding role play partners, This is what I want you to focus on. And I just want to give you a little tip that has helped me tremendously. And I want you to think about this and write this down as part of your plan. I started thinking about where I've lived my entire life. And I grew up in Cleveland. I lived in Los Angeles for a number of years. I lived in Austin, I lived in Houston, I lived in Dallas, and also Northern New Jersey. And so what I did is I got really strategic about finding my role play partners. I had role play partners, Sajik, who is now like a big wig at Keller Williams in their coaching program. He was my role play partner. He was in Cleveland, Ohio. So what I did is I built a really good relationship with him. And guess what? When my grandfather passed, who did I call for the referral to sell my grandfather's house? I called my role play partner. So this is a great way for you to build relationships with agents in different areas that you know where people live, where you have referral partners and you have business opportunities. Think about where you know people. Think about how you could create a relationship and have a referral partner. And then when a family member or a friend needs help, you're like, I know someone, and I know someone who is actively working every day. I've worked with them. I've talked with them. This is an agent like me. This is the type of agent you want to use. So think about that as you guys look for role play partners. Don't just look for people in your office. Look for people outside of your office that can be great referral partners, but also look at people outside your office and even outside your company, because they have different trainings. They have different scripts. They have different objection handlers. You're going to increase your knowledge base by pulling in people from other areas of the US to help you improve your scripting and your role play. So that's just a little tip that I wanted to share with you. The next one is closing at the end. The natural progression of a great listing appointment is getting the paperwork signed. I'm gonna say that again. The natural progression of a great listing presentation is getting a signed listing agreement. So if you're not getting them to sign, there's something that's being lost in the process. Not closing at the presentation opens the door for another agent to come in and take the listing. Listen, the seller is looking to hire a salesperson and they expect you to actually close them. And then when you don't close them, sometimes you're kind of showing them that you don't know how to do your job. Can you see how that could hold true if you're actually not closing them? Let me tell you a bit of a story here. I saw somebody in here from Passaic County. I had a listing in West Milford. It was an expired listing. And when I tell you, I worked my butt off to get this listing. I went out there, I was super prepared. Like, I knew the comps, I knew where they needed to be priced. I understood their motivation, all the things that I'm telling you we need to do. I had that polished and I had it down. And we're sitting there and I go through my presentation. And at the end, I'm like, okay, well, great. All we have to do is sign the paperwork. Here's a pen. And I remember Mr. Wagner, the husband, he was like, David, we really appreciate you. We're going to think it over and we're going to give you a call back. Now, here's what I know, and I shared this with you guys before. If you leave that house without getting the paperwork signed, your chances of getting it signed go down 50%. So I had learned the script, and I'm going to share it with you right now. I had never used it, but I practiced it all the time with my role play partners. So I knew how to do it, but I was a little nervous to use it because it seemed a little pushy to me and a little aggressive to me. And yet they're hiring a salesperson. They expect you to close. And so here's the script. Here's what I said. And you guys can write this down if you want to use it. I said, I can appreciate that you want to think it over, Mr. and Mrs. Wagner. You sound like my wife and I. We don't make a decision without talking to each other first. So I can appreciate that. Now, here's what I want you to pay attention to. I'm not asking their permission. And this is one thing that we do as real estate agents. We ask permission a lot when we need to be telling them what we're going to do. So here's what I said to them. I can appreciate you need to think it over. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to step out to my car. I'm going to return a few phone calls and send some emails. And when I come back in, we're going to make a decision tonight, whether you choose to list with me or if I choose to take your listing, either one is fine. And then I walked out to my car. I didn't wait for them to say that was okay. I walked out to my car. And I remember I got in my car And I dialed my wife and I was like, Shell, you know that script I've been practicing where you walk out the house and you go to your car? I'm like, I just use that script. And I'm just waiting for them to make a decision. So I figured I'd call you. So I'm talking to my wife on the phone. And I was a little nervous to do it. And I could kind of feel that excitement, that energy in me. And it was in the evening time. So it was a little dark. And I saw their front light start to flick. So I was like, I got to call you back. And I get out of my car and I walk back up to their front door and they open the door. And they said, we talked about it and we decided that we're actually going to work with you. And so I sat down and I got the paperwork signed. Why am I telling you that story? I'm telling you that story because that's our job. We have to close. We have to know different ways to close. And we have to also appreciate that some people just need a minute. They just need a minute to have a conversation and think, is David the right guy? Is he the person I want to work with? And sometimes we have to give them that opportunity to have that discussion, and we can't be so pushy. And so by learning to like step out to my car for a few minutes, return some phone calls, I remember getting listings at least 3 or 4 times by using that method. It's just one of the methods of closing, and you need to know at least 5 different ways to close. So thank you for letting me share that story with you. Let me reshare my screen so we can get back into the presentation. Let's see if I can do this without having an issue. Perfect, it worked perfectly. That's awesome. So here's what I want to tell you. I want to introduce you to a concept called the 5X close system. And first of all, you have to understand that the first close happens even before the presentation. So when you're on the phone with them, like you're doing a soft close, when you're doing the pre-qualification, one of the first questions is, when I come to your house Wednesday at 6 p.m. and you feel comfortable with me and you feel confident I can actually sell your home, do you plan on listing your home with me? That's a soft close. Like, and if the answer is yes, great. If the answer is not yes, and they have all these concerns and questions and objections, that's great too, because they're telling you what's going to come up at your meeting so that you can be prepared for it. So you're closing before the actual presentation. When you do the pre-sale and you send out the packet to their home to review before you come out there, you're closing. At the actual listing presentation, you're closing, right? When you first get there, you say, would you like me to handle the sale of your home? If they say yes, and guess what? Stop talking, go over the pricing and get the paperwork signed. There are several different ways and different times that you're closing before the end of that presentation. And you have to know how to do that by following a CAN listing presentation. It's going to give you all the cues and show you where you can start doing the soft close, where you start showing your value. And when people continue to say yes, yes, yes throughout the process, when it's time for them to actually sign the paperwork, it's just another yes. But again, it comes to you having a CAN listing presentation process. Imagine how great it would feel, though. I want you guys to think about that with me. If you felt like you can walk into every house and have a conversation with the seller and walk away if you want the listing, not them choosing you, but do you want it? And you could walk away with signed listing paperwork every single day. How would that feel? I don't know about you guys. I would feel like nothing can stop me. Like I'm all the way up if that's my reality. So I hope that you guys can understand the importance of having a system in your business. The next thing I want to cover with you is being interviewed. And what I mean by being interviewed is actually going to the listing presentation. We can all agree that the listing presentation is really just a big interview, right? However, the question is, who's interviewing who? Most agents, they show up thinking that the seller's interviewing them. Do you know your worth though? When I didn't know my worth as a realtor, when I showed up at the listing appointment, I wanted to win. I had the commission breath like we talked about, where you're willing to do or say anything in order to get the business. And I was coming from a position of lack because I was showing up just about me. I was making everything about me. I didn't have any listings, and I would just show up from a position of applying for a job. I want them to select me. I want them to choose me. However, when you put that type of pressure on yourself, you show up and you're nervous and you can seem flustered. You can seem on edge. You become really desperate. And again, that's where the commission breath comes in. and you start saying things and doing things just to get the business. You start negotiating on your commission. You start being willing to take overpriced listings. You start giving them everything because you just want the business. You want them to choose you. Let me ask you a question though. How great would it feel if you understood your true job is to decide if you actually want the listing? How would your swagger change if you walked into the house and it was like, I have to decide if I want to take your listing? I mean, one of the most powerful scripts I started learning on the phone when I'm talking to for sale by owners and expireds, I used to say this, even when it wasn't true, it became a point where it was my truth. But in the beginning, I would say, I'm not sure that I would take your listing. I don't take every listing. I only work with motivated and coachable sellers. So why don't we get together and have a conversation and see if this would be a good fit? Like from the beginning, I learned to have a conversation where I was coming from a level of authority. Like, you're choosing me, I'm deciding if I choose you. And when you walk into a house and you are making that decision, whether or not you want the listing versus whether or not they want to give it to you, it changes the game. And I will promise you that with a listing process, when you're doing all the things that we've been discussing over the past couple of days, you are showing your value at such a level that the other agents they're interviewing, they can't hold water to you. You are showing how you're different. You're showing your process and why you get your sellers top dollar, why you have a great pricing and marketing strategy, and why you have the results that you have. They want to work with you. It's up to you to decide if you want to work with them. So here's what I will tell you. During that interview, you have to know the motivation. You have to have your questions prepared. You have to have stories. You know, during this presentation right now, I'm giving you some stories about my time as a real estate agent. You have to have stories about working with clients. And sometimes the stories aren't yours. Maybe you heard a story in your office about a specific situation, but it's germane to the conversation that you're having right now with that seller. You can tell someone else's story, but you have to have stories and statistics available to paint the picture that you want to paint to get them to list with you. You also have to take control of that interview. And that starts from the minute you open the door. I train my agents, when you knock on that door and the seller opens the door, you look at your watch. You're very purposeful about this action. Hey, it's David. It's 12 o'clock and we had an appointment at 12 o'clock. Can I come in? That's showing your authority. That's you taking control, and you're showing them, I respect you and I respect your time. I'm here at 12. And as we know, most agents, nobody on this call, of course, but we know most agents don't show up on time. So when we make a point to show them you're here and you're here on time, you're showing up, you're showing your value, you're taking control of that, you're becoming the authority. And then also controlling the conversation. That's so important during that interview process. And as I mentioned before, you take control by asking questions, not by doing a lot of this, by doing a lot of this. Listening, control the conversation. I want to introduce you to a good friend of mine, Haza, who has gone through my training program 8 or 9 times. She could teach the training program. She's been through it so much. So she took control of a meeting, of a listing presentation. She really understood the seller's motivation, and she was willing to walk away when the seller wanted her to price a house at a range that wouldn't get the home sold in time and would cause the seller to have, you know, a missed time frame. They were looking to move in a certain amount of time, and she knew that if she overpriced that listing, that wouldn't happen. And she said, I'd rather turn you down right now than let you down. She was able to say that to the seller because she was so confident in the pricing and her strategy to get the property sold. When you have structure for your interview and you come prepared and you don't get out scripted by the seller and you make it about them and their motivation, they see that and they recognize that. And when Haza said to them, I'd rather turn you down than let you down, because at that price, I know I can't sell it. And that's going to cause you to not be able to hit the goal that you want to hit. It's something about this motion, guys. If you can look at the screen really quickly, when you're willing to do this and get up and walk away, the seller's going to look at you differently, because they're going to recognize that you're really serious about what you're saying. You are an authority, you are a local economist of choice, and you're telling them this number is where it would sell. If you want me to price it here, buy. I'd rather turn you down and let you down because I cannot get you that number. How powerful is that to be able to say that and have that type of connection with the seller? When you say that, they believe you, because if we could sell it for more, why wouldn't we? They make more money as a seller. We would make a higher commission. So of course we would sell it for more if we could. But when we stand our ground and we know our scripting and we say with confidence, I won't take the listing at that price, I'd rather go ahead and just turn you down than let you down. They recognize that you're speaking truth. And if they're highly motivated and you know what that motivation is, and you can press those pain and pleasure buttons, they will list with you at the right price and you'll take more listings. All right, so if you felt confident that you were in a position of power because you were doing the interview, how would that make you feel? I want you guys to put that in the chat. How would that make you feel? And then also tell me if you can commit to doing the interviewing and not being interviewed. I want to see if you guys are willing to make that commitment to your business where you are doing the interviewing and not being interviewed. All right, I see you. I see you. Keep throwing that in the chat. Successful, right? You feel awesome. You feel empowered. That's what you're here for. That's what you want, right? Powerful. I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. Let me just unshare my screen really quickly, and let me ask you guys, out of those areas that we just covered right now, where do you feel that you need the most work in your business? Where do you feel, is it the closing? Is it showing up and being able to ask powerful questions? Is it understanding who's interviewing who? What area do you feel that you need to work on the most in order to improve the listing process in your business? Vicky Chambers, hey, being confident and in control, taking control of the presentation, confidence, consistency continues to come up. I will say this, the benefit of being highly scripted is that it makes you very consistent in everything you say. It makes you very consistent in every single thing that you do. So consistency is huge. I'm really happy to see you guys bring that up. Taking control feels awkward. Yeah, it can be. Being quiet. John, listen, being quiet is one of the hardest things. However, when you learn how to do it, not just in real estate, but in life, just be quiet and listen. You'd be surprised how much information people will give you. And when you learn how to probe them a little bit and say, tell me a little bit more, people will open up to you like no other. And they'll give you so much information that you can use to convert them. Flowing with the conversation, knowledgeable and valuable, be in control and powerful questions, talk less, listening more, convincing versus connecting, asking the questions, practicing scripts constantly. We got to be doing that. Like I said, if you know how to practice your scripts the right way, they become just internalized and it just becomes the dialogue that you have. And when you're not thinking of what to say next, you can actually pay more attention. I don't know about anybody on this call, but there are times that you're meeting with a buyer or meeting with a seller, and they're telling you some important information that can help you seal the deal. You're so busy thinking of, well, what do I say next? How do I respond to that? That you're missing the cues. You're missing what they're sharing with you. And that's why internalizing the script is so important, because it allows you to just be present and be plugged in. You don't have to think about what to say next. You know what to say next. It's second nature to you. So it comes across very naturally, and you're able to have a conversation with them and get them to make a decision to actually buy with you. So what I want to do now is just briefly just review here what we covered. Go ahead to the next screen. So we covered convincing versus connecting. We talked about winging it. Don't wing it. Have a prepared listing presentation. We talked about defending the comps, fighting for their motivation. We talked about closing at the end and the importance of closing, knowing that if you walk away, 50% chance of you getting the paperwork signed later on. And we also talked about who's interviewing who's being interviewed, right? That's what we talked about. I've already jumped past this right quick. You guys have already answered this about what's been the most valuable so far. And I really love that you guys are understanding the point about understanding the scripts, the importance of overcoming objections, the importance of being quiet and listening and letting people share more information with you. I'm so happy that that was very valuable for you and you guys are understanding that process. What we're going to cover tomorrow are the 4 steps to listing mastery. You know, we're live back tomorrow, Thursday at 11 o'clock. In this session, you're going to discover why your mindset is your foundation, why pre-qualifying has to be a standard in your business, not a suggestion, a standard in your business, and how the pre-sale approach increases your conversion rate. You need to do any and everything in your power as you work towards converting them to improve your conversion rate. And the pre-sale that we're going to talk about tomorrow will help you improve your conversion rate. And then also the importance of an internalized canned listing presentation. That's what we're going to cover tomorrow. I'm super excited to get into that because that's the meat and potatoes, right? Knowing how to do those things, understanding the importance of pre-qualifying, understanding what a pre-sale is, what that even means, what you should be doing before you show up at their house. And then more importantly, when you have this listing presentation, you have it memorized and internalized, and you're able to go there and engage with the seller, how that helps with your conversion rate. So let me do something really quickly. I'm going to take myself off spotlight really quick because I want to see all the beautiful faces here. For all of you who don't have bad hair days and all that good stuff, can you turn your cameras on for me? I want to see some faces. I want to see some faces here. All right. You guys say what's up to my Instagram and my TikTok piece, and y'all say what's up. I appreciate y'all being here today. I hope today was valuable. What's going on? What's going on? And I just wanted to wrap up. As I mentioned before, I have a mastermind group that starts at 12:30, so I need to wrap up. But I wanted to share something with you guys really quickly. I talked about this morning. You need to know your worth. I want you to just raise your real hand if you know your worth. Know your worth. Yeah. I want you to keep your hand up if you're a 6% agent. All right. You are. Here's what I'll tell you. If you don't know your worth, you're not going to be able to convince someone else of your worth. You have to know that when you help them, when they're coachable and you help them price that property correctly and get their home sold, they're always going to sell it faster. They're always going to sell it for more. They're always going to sell it right with no hassle, right? When they hire you, you have a job to do. And when you do it, they're always going to be better. Stop giving your money away. Stop leaving your money on the table. We tell sellers all the time, hire me because I'm going to make sure I sell your house for top dollar. I'm going to make sure you don't leave any equity on the table. We say that all the time. That's how we convince them to hire us. You guys would agree with that, right? But in the same breath, we'll reduce our commission to get the business. One thing I learned a long time ago, and this isn't my script, I learned it from someone else, but I took this and I embodied this. I would tell people when they would ask me to reduce my commission, they always said, "Will you reduce your commission?" You know, my favorite response? Yeah, that's right, Maria, I see you. My favorite response is to go and I look at them like this. No? You have any other questions? And then I do this. Because I want to keep talking and telling them why I'm worth what I'm worth. I want to keep talking. I want to keep convincing. But I have learned, no. Do you have any other questions? And that silence, man, when you're not saying anything and they're not saying anything, that silence is really awkward. And you want to open your mouth. I think you guys understand this. The first person that speaks loses. So I've learned to just sit there. And eventually the husband and wife will kind of look at each other and they'll go, okay, right? You have to understand what you're worth. You have to be willing to walk away. And here's what I'll tell you, and here's what I've learned. The times that I discounted my commission because I felt like I needed to get the listing, the seller stayed in my pocket the entire listing. What do I mean by that? I reduced my commission down from 6 to 5 to get the business, right? And then an offer came in and the buyer and seller couldn't come to terms and they were a couple of grand apart. What's the seller say? You and the other agent need to figure that out. If you want this deal to work, y'all need to come out of your commission a grand each to make it work, right? And then when the inspection report came in and the seller fixed everything except the water heater, and the seller was like, I'm done. If they want the house, they can do the water heater. And the buyer said, I'm not doing the water heater. If the seller wants to sell, they need to do it. Well, then that seller comes to you again and they say, listen, I'm done. If you and the other agent want to make this work, you guys take care of the water heater. And you find yourself just constantly going in your pocket because now you're invested. Now you want to see this thing close. And the seller already knows that you're willing to negotiate your commission. I'm a firm believer in we teach people how to treat us. And I teach people up front that my commission is not negotiable. Now, let me say this. I cannot sit here in good faith and tell you guys there have not been times when I've negotiated my commission. Of course I have. We all have to. What I need you to understand is 6 to 5, stop doing that. If someone wants to negotiate with me, I'll say, well, I can do it for 5.9. I can do it for 5.7. There's so much room, but we fall into this trap and this habit, and I see you guys do it all the time, where you automatically think you have to come down the percentage point. You don't. And even before I would come down, I've learned to say things to sellers like, well, you want me to come down to 5%. Let me ask you, if I get you over list price, would you be willing to pay me more? And what will they say? No. Well, you want me to take less, but you wouldn't be willing to pay me more if I got you better results. Then why don't we just meet in the middle and stick at the 6% then? Right? There's so many ways to overcome and fight and defend your commission. I just wanted to tell you guys, when you know your worth and you believe it, it's going to be hard for people to convince you to negotiate down. You'll have to do it every once in a while, but that should be a far exception and not the rule. And so many times you guys think you have to get the listing by negotiating your commission. You don't. You do that because you're not doing a great job of showing your value throughout the entire listing process. If you're showing your value from the time you pick up the phone, by the time you actually get there, they're willing to pay you. There's somebody on this call who's one of my students, and I so want to just have her unmute and put her on the spot. And I know she knows I'm talking about her because she has gotten 2 listing opportunities just in this past week. Oh, can I put you on the spot? No, I don't know if I can put you on the spot. I can put you on the spot. Can you unmute for me really quickly? I just have to introduce you to Ashley. And the reason why I want to introduce you to her is 2 reasons. And I'll promise to wrap this up in about 3 minutes. I met Ashley on TikTok. She sent me a message and was like, hey, I'm an agent. I'm having a hard time. Can you help me? And I connected with her, invited her to my morning mindset call. She became part of the tribe. She eventually went through my training program. And that's one of the reasons I keep posting on social media, because of these relationships I'm making. Like, my life was changed from meeting Ashley. Her life was changed from having gone through the program. And Ashley, I know you're not prepared for this, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, but you just had 2 wins in the last week or so with an expired and with a referral, right, around commission. If I could have you tell them in like 2 quick minutes what that was, do you mind sharing?
Well, I'll talk about one because I don't want to talk about a referral because it's not fully.
I got it. Talk about the expired.
Where it's not 100% signed, sealed, and delivered yet.
Okay.
But with the expired, that is that we're getting pictures done next week and putting it on the market. Is one of the highest price points I've done so far, and he did not want to go above 5%. So over the phone, he's like, "Oh, what's your commission?" I'm like, once we sit down and talk face to face and I show you, we'll decide then if you choose to list with me or I choose to list with you. And then we'll talk about commission. Trust me, we'll talk about it. He's like, all right, cool. So we get there, I do my whole thing, whatever the case may be. And he gets to the point and he goes, what's your commission? And I go, 6%. And he goes, 6%. And he was the expired that paid his last previous agent 5%. So he goes, 6%, that's a little high. I go, 6%. And then he was like, well, and I said, do you know how commission works? And I did the whole spiel on how commission works. And he goes, yeah, that's fair, 6%.
There we go. She understood, and she's not going through the full thing right now, but there's a script on how to show how commission works. Most people don't even know. And when you can explain to them, you have $6 bills and you break it down, maybe as a bonus tomorrow, I'll show you what that looks like. She was able to convince him to get the listing, and not to put her business out there, but this listing is almost 2.5 times her normal price point, and she got it at 6%. So you're talking about, by learning and internalizing scripts and understanding how to have those uncomfortable conversations, she's got an opportunity right now that's worth like $42,000. All of us can have that type of opportunity. People are willing to hire you and pay you what you're worth when you know what you're worth. And once you're willing to defend your commission and know how to defend it, you can get 6% or 5.75 or 5, whatever it is, you can get those listings, but it requires that you show up and you're highly scripted. And I had to have Ashley share that, because I also have to let her know how proud I am of her. I mean, it's amazing how much she's grown and what she's out there doing. And she's the prospector. She gets on that phone, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow. One of the main reasons, though, that I start off talking about the listing process is because I need people to feel comfortable that when someone says yes, you know, you can go take the listing. And then we talk about getting on the phone. She understands what her job is. Our job every day is to talk to people about real estate and find the motivated and coachable who are willing to work with us. That's our number one job. And we just have to be ready for when they say yes. When they say yes, we have to be ready to go out there and interview them. They're not interviewing us. We have to be willing to interview them.
Can I say one thing? I know you're recording this, and I probably wouldn't have said this if I knew this was going to be recorded, but whatever, we're here now.
Go for it.
So when I met David, through TikTok and everything else, I was 9 months or 10 months as a real estate agent, and I closed 2 buyer deals, and I was running around crazy with buyers, losing my head. After the next, I want to say 12 months. So now I'm 2 years in the game. I went from selling $600,000 in real estate in my first year to close to $3 million in my second year, because of the things that David taught me and because plugging in and everything else. And I am so grateful that I did it, because he literally stopped me from wanting to quit the business to being so invested now. And there's more things that I need to do and grow, like we all do. But if you're thinking about it and you don't know what to say, and I was scared to pick up the phones, definitely the way to go. All right, that's all I want to say. I love you.
I love you back. I'm super proud of you. Keep doing your thing. You motivate a lot of people too. People are paying attention to you. We don't know how many people are watching our journey, but people are watching our journey. I know, Ashley, people are watching you and they're really inspired. I appreciate you sharing. I know I put you on the spot, but thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to wrap up and get on my mastermind, but let me tell you this. I'm looking forward to wrapping up tomorrow and talking about the listing process and talking about what we need to do to get out there and get our unfair share. I appreciate you guys. If you found anything valuable from today, like I said, take a screen grab, tag me on Instagram, tag me on TikTok. I love to see that you guys are getting something from the program, getting some engagement here. And I look forward to connecting with you tomorrow at 11. And if you guys are free tonight, I host a call called Real Talk with D-Rad. And I have a special guest today, Khadijah, who's going to be talking about, she wanted to get out of the business and she kind of got burned out, and she had to go back and kind of rediscover her purpose and rediscover her drive. And we're going to talk about that tonight at 5 o'clock. And so I'll send out a post. So if you guys want to join that, you can join the call tonight. It's on Zoom and it's free. Would love to fellowship with you guys this evening if you're available. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you guys. I hope you have a good rest of your Wednesday. Go get after it. See you tomorrow at 11 o'clock for sure. See ya.